Hi, so let's go through again how to structure. Hi, let's go again. Take two. Hi, let's talk again about how to structure the exam question that is what? Take three. Hi, let's go over again how to structure 12-mark answers in the religious studies paper. We're going to focus on the thematic questions. So, as if for the short course, it's the same for the full course as you remember. You'll get in the short course 4 of these kinds of questions, and in the full course, you'll get, of course, 8. So, they're worth quite a lot of marks, and if you can nail the technique, then you should do very well. You'll get a statement, and that statement will be deliberately slightly contentious, so you should be able to agree or disagree with it. You don't have the luxury of time to start thinking, what an interesting statement, I don't know, what do I think about it? Do that before the exam. Just go and write your argument. It will tell you that you need to refer to religious teaching in your answer. It will depend on whether you're doing Islam, Christianity, or the themes. And in the themes, it can be one or both religions. If you're writing on Islam, obviously you need to refer to Islam. If you're writing on the Christianity bit, it has to be Christianity. But let's look more particularly at the themes where you could use any religion. So the descriptors tell us about writing a well-argued response, reason, consideration of different points of view. That doesn't mean, oh yeah, some people might think that, but whatever. You actually have to show us why the opposing view is wrong and why you are correct. You need to refer to religion, and not just referring to religion, but making sure that that reference is actually applied to the issue. Logical chains of reasoning, so not just throwing things out there randomly, but actually going from A to B to C, etc. So that should all be fairly obvious. The way in which you should structure your answers is that you should obviously start with what you actually think, or what your argument is, even if you're actually undecided. That's what we call the thesis. You give a good reason for that, you explain that, you link it back to the question. Repeat for a second point. Afterwards, I would give an antithesis or a counter argument before drawing a conclusion. So, we'll then look at the structure. You've come across this before, probably in English. Essentially, you make a point, you had to have some evidence to support that point. It might be a religious teaching, it might be something from scripture, the Quran or the Bible, for example. You need to show how that relates to the issue, explain it, link it back to the question or to your point, and evaluate it if it's another point, say why it's a good or weak, and then move on. In terms of concluding, you want to finish with a short paragraph again that is sort of summing up what you've said, but saying it in a slightly fresh way. Maybe choose or savour a juicy last argument for the end. You're essentially slamming the door in their faces so that they can't put their foot in with another objection. So when you get the question, you've got to essentially make up your mind on what you're going to argue, having decided and deduced what the statement's actually asking. You need to think about what evidence you're going to use, what the counter objections are, and then you write it. You don't have the luxury of more than about a minute to plan these. You've got about 15 minutes to actually write them. So we're going to have a go at doing that now. And I've just brought up the religion, peace and conflict. This is a past paper question, and I haven't before, so here we go. There are no good reasons for countries to possess nuclear weapons. So while I'm just copying this into a Word document for us to have a go at. Let's think about whether we agree. For some reason, actually, that isn't working, so let's just paste it in here anyway. And here we go. There are no good reasons for countries to possess nuclear weapons. Yeah, I agree. That's going to be my position, definitely. It's bad. It's bad. People die. That's bad. Deterrent doesn't. People. Okay. On the other hand, people are going to say it deters mad people, and I'm going to say no, it doesn't. Even if it were true, it wouldn't justify the use of them. Okay, that's it. That's my plan. Boom. Let's get on to it. So, here we go. Here's my thesis. It's 1522 when I'm doing this. So 1522. It's now 1523. This needs to be done by 1535, 1537 at the latest. Okay, my thesis is no. Nuclear weapons, because these cause indiscriminate carnage and destroy whole ecosystems. It is utterly immoral to deploy them. The only reason for possessing them is to deter others, which we will see is no good reason for owning them, and cannot be said to work. Firstly, the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 showed us firsthand what utter devastation nuclear weapons create. Not merely soldiers who die as a result, but also civilians, to say nothing of animal and plant life as a result of radiation. It is unjustifiable to punish the innocent in such a way. The conditions of a just war include jus in bello, and this is proportionality. So that's going to be my main point. Many Christians, let's bring in religion, would support this, as the Bible teaches us to do not kill, and to not repay evil for evil, but pray for those who persecute you. and love your enemies. Firstly, it is not at all clear that, or rather, firstly, even this would be enough to argue for a general pacifist policy, but even more so for nuclear weapons. For how can it be that that children playing in a school destroyed by a nuclear bomb were the enemies of the Allied forces in World War II? Now we need the counter. Of course, there are those who would argue that owning nuclear weapons is a necessary evil. Then we would be vulnerable. They may suggest that whilst it was regrettable having to drop the bomb on Hiroshima, it saved the war being carried on for many more years with even greater loss of life. This is pure conjecture. We are certain of is the destruction caused by nuclear weapons. Further, we cannot deter mad people. You'd have to be mad. Resources. Logical if you were a despot to use chemical or biological weapons that target populations rather than whole areas. If others might further argue that owning them means we will never need to use them, but this is illogical, because deterrents only work if if one's enemies are convinced one will use the weapons. If not, there is no point in owning them. So countries can only legitimately own weapons if they are genuinely prepared to use them. However, this brings us back to the moral question. We no longer live in a world of nation states competing for land and power. Our wars are more economical, and the physical struggles to be between small groups and sects, not nuclear powers. It is therefore time to disarm. So this is kind of the conclusion bit now. I've got hardly any time. I need to bring in a bit more religion, I think. Jesus said, "Those who live by the sword die by the sword." There's a clear indication that violence begets violence. Owning nuclear weapons can only ever lead to destruction. The possibility that they will be used against us. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus tells his disciples to arm themselves and asks if they've any swords. They have 2. It's enough, he says. There are 11 of them. This suggests the Christian response is to see to it that one cannot be easily overcome, but not to be an aggressor. Those who would say trident, which is of course our nuclear deterrent, is like having 2 swords, clearly haven't thought hard about the analogy. The billions of pounds wasted on nuclear weapons, which are always immoral to use, would be better spent on the poor. Boom. Done. Okay. It's a little long, perhaps. I said that's actually taken, say, 23, 33. I'd say that's 11 minutes. So that's not too bad. And I've written 580 words. So just going through this, it's very clear here, the thesis statement. You're saying there's no good reasons why they cause indiscriminate carnage and destroy whole ecosystems. It's utterly immoral. Granted, it might deter others. So that's obviously going to be the counter. Then you've got your first point. And you're using an example. It showed us what devastation it does. You further explain this. Now you link it to Jus in Bello. That's a religious teaching. It comes from Augustine. It would be better if you mentioned Augustine. Link it more explicitly here. The Bible teaches do not kill, not to repay evil, but pray for those who persecute you. It's not enough to just quote these. You kind of got to do something with it. So here we do something with it, and we say, look, therefore that might make us pacifists. But actually, surely, if we take that seriously, we can't drop it on children. Children die when nuclear bombs are destroyed. So it kind of explains and links that quotation to your point. Now, you've got to consider the opposite. So there are going to be those who say that it's unnecessary, but without them we would be vulnerable. That's their point. And then a second counter as well. It's sad, but it made things worse. This is pure conjecture. That's all you need to do to come across. This is the evaluation, okay? You're saying this point is rubbish. It's just people making things up out of thin air. We can't know. What we can know is the destruction that nuclear weapons cause, and then we're going to reply to their main point, which is about deterrence. So we say, okay, it might deter people if we have nuclear weapons, then they won't deploy. Well, deterrence only works for people who are rational. People who are mad don't care, and that's what you've got to sort of say here. Note that this whole thing, this is about logic and whether something would be the case. So you don't need to bring in scripture here. You're making a logical argument. You're now linking it kind of to the real world. We don't live in this world. It's not the Cold War anymore. It's not 1991. Now you've got to bring back a bit of religious teaching. So we're going to bring in a little teaching here. Jesus said, "Those who live by the sword die by the sword." So quotation. You explain that quotation. What does it mean? Well, violence leads to other violence, and then link it back to the question. Only nuclear weapons only lead to destruction. They could be used against us. So you've got teaching, you've got the explanation, you've got the linking back to the question here. Then you've got another example of religion. What's Jesus doing? He tells them to arm themselves. 2 swords are enough, and there's 11 of them. You're interpreting this. You're, again, at the very last second, bringing in the other point of view. So someone might say this against your point of view. Having used the same quotation and it made a different interpretation, but you're saying, look, nah, come on, this is not a false analogy, and that's how you finally evaluate it here. So there you go. It was pretty short. It wasn't time, as you can see, really for thinking. What did I use? I used Jus in Bello. I used do not kill, love your enemies, and I used Jesus saying about put up your sword, those who live by the sword die by the sword, and then I used his example about get a sword if you've got one, but only 2. 2 between 11 is kind of all you need. So 5 teachings, that's more than enough. Done something with those. I've also used lots of logical chains of reasoning, and importantly, I have been able to expand my points and link them with some logical chains. So go and do likewise.